Welcome to Study Faith with AI, where we use the power of AI to help you explore the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I'm Meg Jensen.
And I'm Paul Carter.
And we're Google AIs. Whether you're a lifelong member or just starting to learn about the church, we're here to dive deep into its history, beliefs, and culture.
So if you're ready to learn, you're in the right place.
That's right.
Let's get started.
Okay, so today we're diving deep into something pretty huge, right? April 6th, 1830. The day the Church of Christ was officially organized.
A foundational moment, no doubt about it.
Right.
And we're going to really unpack what went down on that day, the power dynamics, the structure. Oh, and we can't forget Oliver Cowdery. His role is super interesting.
Absolutely. He's kind of all over the place in those early days.
Right. So we're going to dig into Joseph Smith's own histories, memoirs from other early members, key documents from that time, like the Articles and Covenants, what we now call Section 20 in the Doctrine and Covenants.
Plus, we're bringing in insights from historical analyses. That's always key, right?
Always. Helps us see the bigger picture.
Exactly. So what we want to do today, and this is for you listening, is to really help you grasp those very first moments of this movement. Who were the leaders? How did leadership even get structured? What were the basic beliefs right off the bat? Think of this as a crash course on the origins, but, way more interesting than just reading a textbook.
100%.
All right, let's start with a setting. Paint us a picture.
Okay, so picture this. April 6th, 1830. The place. Peter Whitmer Sr.'s home in Fayette, New York.
Fayette, right, not Manchester. I know there's some back and forth on that.
Yeah, you're right to point that out. Some early accounts put it in Manchester, but later research clarifies it was Fayette, for this event at least.
Got it. So Fayette it is. How many people were there? I've seen different numbers.
Yeah, the estimates range from 30 to 60 believers, which is a pretty wide range when you think about it.
Right, and that's just for those in attendance. But when we talk about the formal organization itself, the actual founding act, it was a much smaller group.
Exactly, just 6 people.
6 people. That's interesting to think about.
And just to be clear, there were already gatherings and baptisms happening before this date, in the Manchester area mostly.
Oh yeah, with folks like Joseph Smith Sr. and Martin Harris.
Yeah, them. And get this, Oliver Cowdery was the one doing the baptizing before the formal organization on April 6th.
So this wasn't just springing up out of nowhere. There was already activity, people joining.
Absolutely. There's this great account from Lucy Mack Smith, Joseph Smith Jr.'s mom, talking about how Joseph reacted when his dad was baptized.
Yeah.
Really emotional. You can tell these weren't just, theoretical things. People were living this.
Super interesting. So baptism, a key ordinance, even predates the actual organization of the church. That's worth noting. Let's talk about April 6th, that formal organization. What actually happened?
So Joseph Smith's own history gives us the rundown. It started with a prayer. The 6, ones involved in the organization.
Gotcha.
They proceeded, according to previous commandment, those are his words, to ask the others if they accepted them, Joseph and Oliver specifically, as teachers, and whether they were, okay with organizing as a church, again, according to this commandment they'd received earlier.
Okay, so they're following something they believe was a directive, a revelation of some sort. What did people say to that?
The record says it was unanimous. Everyone agreed to it.
Interesting how that consent, that agreement from the group, was part of it from the beginning.
Definitely. And then came the big moment. Oliver Cowdery ordained Joseph Smith as a prophet, seer, and so forth.
There's that and so forth. What else was there?
Well, David Whitmer's account is helpful here. He remembers the title as prophet, seer, and revelator, and he specifically says people understood they were to receive Joseph's words as God's.
Wow. Right from the start, that prophetic leadership role is established.
Yeah, and, thinking back to Oliver Cowdery, his role before April 6th was huge. I mean, he was the main scribe for the Book of Mormon translation.
Right. And he did those first baptisms we were talking about, including Joseph Smith's.
Exactly.
Okay, so he's already super involved before the church is even formally organized. What about during that April 6th meeting?
Well, like we said, he's the one who ordained Joseph. And then in this brand new church, he becomes the second elder, with Joseph as first elder.
So boom, you've got a hierarchy right there.
Exactly.
And he keeps going, right? What does he do after that?
Oh yeah, he's busy. Just a few days later, he gives the first public sermon of the church in Fayette. And he's involved in ordaining others, signing those licenses that basically say, hey, this guy's official.
Wow. Talk about shaping the early church. But then there are these disagreements, right?
Right. We can't ignore those. It shows how, even from the start, things weren't always smooth sailing. One disagreement was about a verse in the Articles and Covenants, section 20 now, and it even drew in the Whitmer family.
So even within this small group, there were already different interpretations and potential conflict.
Definitely. And then there's the whole Hirum Page situation.
Okay, tell me about that. This is where things get interesting with authority and revelation.
So Hirum Page starts claiming he's receiving revelations through a stone. And Oliver Cowdery and some others believed him.
Hold on. So you've got Joseph Smith, the prophet, and then this other guy claiming revelations too.
Yeah, and it really tested how they were understanding spiritual authority.
What did Joseph Smith do about that?
He comes out with a revelation, Doctrine and Covenants 28. And it's clear, Joseph, as head of the church, is the only one who gets revelation for the whole church.
Okay, that draws a line in the sand. What about Oliver Cowdery? Did he back down?
He did. At a conference later that year, September 1830, Joseph is sustained as the one who receives revelations. And Oliver publicly admitted he was wrong about Hirum Page.
That seems like a huge moment for solidifying Joseph's authority as the prophet.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go back to the power structure. We've got Joseph and Oliver at the top, but then things expand, right?
Right. By June 9th, 1830, other officers are ordained. John Whitmer, Joseph Smith Sr., Christian Whitmer, they're given specific roles. And 6 guys are chosen as organizers, like they're spreading things out.
So organization is developing fast. Now the Articles and Covenants, now D&C 20, it's not just about beliefs, right? It's about how the church is run too.
Exactly. And it didn't just appear on April 6th. It actually started as a manuscript by Oliver Cowdery back in 1829.
Interesting. What was in that early version?
A lot of it came from the Book of Mormon. And D&C 18 tells us that Oliver was actually seeking guidance on what to include. So even the development of this document was, revelation-based.
He wasn't just making it up as he went along?
Nope. So this Articles and Covenants was meant to lay out the church's beginnings, the basic doctrines, the ordinances like baptism and who does what, both for members and priesthood holders. It's a blueprint, basically.
And when did it become, official?
It was presented at the June 1830 conference, and everyone voted to accept it. So it becomes the first canonized revelation, like the official word on how things are supposed to be.
Wow. So what are some of the big things in it?
Well, it talks about how the church started, how Joseph Smith was called by God to organize it. It goes through the core doctrines, things like the creation, the fall, the atonement. A lot of it comes straight from the Book of Mormon. It lays out the requirements for baptism, humility, repentance, taking on Christ's name.
In the Book of Mormon itself, it's a big deal in this document, right?
Huge. The Articles and Covenants says it's got the fullness of the gospel, it proves the Bible's true, and it shows that prophets still exist today. It even gives specific wording for how to do the sacrament.
So it's really comprehensive. You said Oliver Cowdery had an earlier draft. What was he focused on in that one?
It seems like he was really focused on the practical steps of joining the church and then living a good life. Repentance, baptism, priesthood, sacrament, how to behave, and that core message of coming to Christ.
Interesting. So it expands from there to become the Articles and Covenants. Now let's talk about authority. Joseph Smith, Oliver Cowdery, how could they just claim they had the authority to start a church and set up all these rules? Did they mention the first vision? The priesthood restoration.
So in the record of the April 6th meeting itself, they say they were acting according to previous commandment, which they got back in June 1829. So they're saying God told them to do this.
But what about those big events that gave Joseph Smith his authority in the first place? The first vision, John the Baptist, Peter, James, and John restoring the priesthood.
You're right to bring those up. While those specific events aren't explicitly mentioned as the reason for organizing the church on April 6th, you have to remember, those events are what gave Joseph the authority to receive that previous commandment in the first place.
So they're the foundation, even if they're not explicitly mentioned in the account of the meeting itself.
Exactly. And think about this. On April 6th, they get another revelation. It's D&C 21 now. And this one says that Joseph is a seer, translator, prophet, apostle, elder. And it tells people they need to listen to him like he's speaking for God.
So that solidifies his role even further right on the day the church is organized.
Absolutely.
Okay, back to Hirum Page and his revelations. That must have been a real challenge for the young church.
It was. Here's Oliver Cowdery, A top leader supporting this guy who's saying he's getting revelations too. It could have caused some serious division.
And D&C 28, the revelation where Joseph clarifies he's the only one who gets church-wide revelation, that was a game changer.
Totally. And Oliver, he eventually accepted that.
Which is important. Shows how even leaders had to adjust their understanding as things developed.
For sure.
So those first few months were a whirlwind. Organization, doctrines, navigating challenges to authority, and Oliver Cowdery is right there in the middle of it all.
Yeah, and then after all that, things shift again for him.
How so?
So remember that revelation, D&C 28, the same one that deals with Hirum Page. It also calls Oliver to a mission, to preach to the American Indians.
Wow. Talk about a change of pace.
Right. He goes from second elder to disagreeing about revelation to being sent on a mission. Shows how dynamic things were in those early days.
Absolutely. So to sum things up, April 6, 1830, a small group gathers. They agree to organize. Joseph Smith is ordained with Oliver Cowdery playing a huge role. The Articles and Covenants starts to provide a framework for the church. And then they have to figure out how authority and revelation work, especially with that Hirum Page situation.
Great summary. And it's all about people, right? Strong personalities trying to figure things out, following inspiration, and sometimes disagreeing.
For sure. So, to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive gave you a real sense of what happened on that crucial day in 1830, and how the Church of Christ first began to take shape. It's a story of leadership, of doctrines being established, and of people like Oliver Cowdery who were there from the start, through both the highs and the lows.
It makes you think, right, about how religious movements are born, how leadership works, and the role of those early key players.
Exactly. So we'll leave you with this. Think about what we've discussed today. What does it tell you about the nature of leadership, about how religious beliefs become established, and about how people shape the course of a new faith? It's a fascinating story that started on April 6th, 1830, but it's still unfolding today.
If you find value in this exploration, please like, share, follow, and consider becoming a subscriber. Your contributions help keep these conversations going and allows us to maintain the highest quality production. You can find all the details at studyfaithwithai.com. Thank you for being part of this journey.